All right, we're going to call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order on March 15th, 2023. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Moran.
Present.
Alderwoman Timmons.
Here.
Alderman Clemmons.
Here.
Alderman GOV.
Here.
Alderman Camo is here. Alderman Clee.
Here.
And Mayor Donches.
Here.
Also in attendance is Alderman Lopez, Alderman Tebow, and Steve Bolton.
All right, first we have public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak to the committee? Communications. First from Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager, Alderman Camo.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve a second amendment to transit contracting agreement between the City of Nashua and First Transit for transportation services in the amount not to exceed $406,041.60. Funding will be through Department 186 Transportation, Fund 55690, Regular Transportation Services.
And I believe Mr. Sullivan is here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the committee. For the record, Matt Sullivan, Community Development Division Director, here on behalf of the Nashua Transit System this evening for this second amendment to the existing contract between the city and our transit service provider, First Transit. I thought I'd start just briefly before getting into the details of the contract amendment with a little bit of history for folks who've been seeing my emails, particularly over the last 3 months. You've all seen that we are having substantial issues with hiring and retaining existing workforce within the transit system, and particularly on the First Transit side of the house, if you will. That's really based on the fact that wages have become quite competitive within our region for both CDL and non-CDL commercial drivers. And remember that a lot of these folks are transferable between not only the bus driving industry, but between the school bus driving industry and other trucking industries. And so as wages have increased in that market, we have seen drivers leave, and we've also seen fewer drivers coming into our shop to ask for employment. And those drivers coming in is directly controlled by our ability and First Transit's ability to provide a competitive wage to them. And so over the last 3 to 6 months, we've been working collaboratively with First Transit to try to identify a path forward. And ultimately, something happened first, and that was that we were forced to make substantial route modifications and route cuts and route consolidations impacting many of our riders as a result of those labor shortages that we were simply not able to recover from. That brings us to the amendment this evening. And that is what we believe will be certainly an amendment that will address the existing labor shortage. And that is a contract amendment with First Transit that will allow them to begin paying their bus drivers and their staff more to provide the service that we're all accustomed to within the city, our existing fixed route, paratransit, and of course, our elderly service as well. Specifically, this is a not to exceed for the remaining 15 months of the First Transit contract of $406,000 approximately. But that's really split into two independent components. One is the fact that the city pays a regularly hourly rate to First Transit based on the hours of service that are provided. The second is that there's a fixed cost for First Transit services, really focused on the administration and some of the office functions that First Transit provides for the Nashua Transit System as well. Specifically, the request is to increase what was currently contemplated under years 4 and 5 of the contract to $42 an hour from the existing $35.96 an hour or $37.06, depending upon year 4 or 5. Those would both increase to $42 an hour. And the new fixed expenses would increase from between $47,000 and $48,000 a month up to $56,000 a month approximately. So this represents an overall increase over the life of the contract of $406,000 that we believe will directly address our ability to hire workers. I wanted to address a few questions that I've certainly got, I think, both from our First Transit team, but also our Nashua Transit System workers, and I think the public too. Number one being, how are we sure that this modification will change our ability to hire drivers? And I'm going to stand before you this evening and say that we cannot guarantee that that will in fact be the case. However, we have done substantial market wage study, and I've included that for most of you this evening. It's a colored table with a yellow top table line. And I hope that this speaks for itself in that we are nowhere near matching regional competition. Alderman Lopez, I can provide you with a copy too if you do not have one in front of you this evening.
Okay, I noticed the bus drivers aren't there anymore. So.
Yes, you've certainly noticed the impacts, but the message is clear, and that is that even as of October when this wage study was conducted, We were in several cases beyond on either the starting wage or on the top end wage for our bus drivers. So based on that wage study, we're quite confident that we will bring people through the door immediately based on the wages that we'll be advertising, and we're confident that that will stay strong through the remaining 15 months of the contract. Beyond that, however, we are, as part of this contract negotiation process that's really been taking place for several months, we are going to be putting in place some performance criteria and hiring performance measures associated with this increase. We are simply not throwing money at the problem. We are going to be asking First Transit to hold up their end of the deal and ensuring that they are actually demonstrating that they're providing the service that we've committed to as part of this amendment. I would just point out from a financial perspective that the $406,000 number is based on the ability to begin providing all of the routes again. And so in the event that we are only able to incrementally provide additional service back to the level that we were at, or only 3/4 of the routes, the costs will not be that high. They will be diminished based on the hours of service that we will in fact be providing. But that $406,000 is really a not to exceed, assuming full service for the next 15 months of the contract. I'd also be remiss if I didn't point out that we do have the option to remain with First Transit. We've been with for a very long period of time, for 3 years past the life of this 5-year contract. That will be evaluated after we see how the next 15 months of performance will go, and we'll be coming back to you to report on that. And hopefully, to Alderman Lopez's point, we'll actually be seeing a demonstrable difference in the way that service is being provided. I also I guess want to close, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I've heard some good ones already from members of the board and the committee. I also wanted to just mention that this has been very challenging for the riders. Above all else, it's been very challenging for First Transit. It's also been very challenging for the city staff. And so this is a solution that, yes, is directed at the First Transit party, but we believe will be comprehensively impactful for all of the folks involved with the transit system here in the city of Nashua, which we of course hope becomes a larger number day by day. And our ability to provide routes in a way that we're comfortable with and demonstrate the best quality of service includes a lot of fixed route service that we're hoping to return to. Be happy to answer any questions about the specifics of the contract and the numbers contained in the memo that I provide to the committee. But I'm hopeful that you'll endorse this legislation proceeding or this communication moving forward to the Board of Aldermen for full consideration.
Alderwoman Clee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I did speak with Director Sullivan prior to this meeting. In the documentation, it talks about the hourly rate going from $35.96 per hour to $42 per hour. And we have this document here that talks about a starting rate of $20 an hour. So if you could explain that is not necessarily, probably not, the hourly rate that these people will get. So the public is not going to go, oh, wow, we're now paying them $42 an hour.
Yeah, great question. And it's not just the public, it's actually our employees at Nashua Transit on the city side too. You know, their work is valued as well. And so I don't want to send the wrong message. So 2 comments or responses to that. One, that is not the hourly rate that will be paid to the employees. That's a fully baked, if you will, rate that includes indirect costs, benefits, insurance, all of those costs associated with having an employee on board. Those are all baked into that per hour cost that is then billed back to the city. There are some remaining costs that are included, of course, in that fixed, but those are really the office and administrative staff and the provision of that support. So the $42 an hour is a fully baked rate. I do also want to address, though, that you'll notice that we're not providing an hourly rate for your consideration this evening. And the reason for that is that one of the things that First Transit does is they actually do all the negotiations with the Teamsters Union or collective bargaining unit on behalf of the city. And so the wages to be set are to be set, have not been confirmed at this time. What I can say, though, is that we have clear demonstrated commitments by First Transit that they will be providing a wage in a range that brings us into a very competitive position with the numbers that I've included on the wage analysis in front of you. And so I can't say exactly what that number will be, but we're going to be doing 3 things: raising the starting salary for a non-CDL driver, raising the starting salary for a CDL driver, and also decreasing the time, and this is really important, decreasing the time it takes for a driver to be making the top end wage. Our current scale is about 5 years. Most other transit agencies are about 2 years, and that's a really good incentive to get folks to stay rather than move somewhere else where they might be paid significantly more.
Yes.
Thank you. And again, something that we've talked about, if we do bring these drivers on, it's not a panacea that suddenly we can open up the routes because there is a training period, correct?
That's correct, and so it's a great question. So even in the event that this contract is approved at your next Board of Alderman meeting, not this evening, but the following, we would not likely see any demonstrable return to service for at least 2 months based on the need to bring folks in and train them. The one caveat to that is that we are shifting towards having more non-CDL drivers and more vans on the road. So it's possible that as soon as these new rates are decided upon and advertised, that we could see an increase of non-CDL drivers that do not require the CDL path to certification, which takes so long. But even so, I'd be hesitant to commit to any immediate change in service. But we do hope that by the beginning of the new fiscal year, we will be significantly returned to our normal route structure.
Thank you. May I make one comment, sir?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for indulging me. I want to commend you and all of your workers. Your staff has been doing a phenomenal job trying to do this balancing act. I've had constituents who, because of the changes and so on, have called, and you've made arrangements so they can get to where they have to go. I'm not saying that that's always been with every single person, but you guys have been as accommodating as you can under these circumstances. And I know there are probably still people out there who aren't happy, and I know Alderman Lopez, he's been suffering quite a bit through all of this. So I know it's not ideal, but thank you for all that you're trying to do. So.
Well, just if I could quickly respond, certainly it's been no credit of mine, but it's actually impressed me how dynamic we've been and responsive. We've not been perfect. We haven't been perfect about communication because this has been changing daily, but one of the benefits of this being a city entity is that we do have the ability to be a bit more nimble, and I think that's been demonstrated despite some very challenging circumstances.
Thank you.
Alderman Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Sullivan, do you happen to know what the base rate range would be without, I don't know, sure, negotiations going forward, but just maybe a rough idea?
Yeah, I'm hesitant, as you might expect, to indicate anything specific, but I believe we're going to be talking about raising both the starting salary for CDL and non-CDL by several dollars. It's not going to be a matter of throwing a dollar or 50 cents at the problem. It's going to be several dollars in increase.
And follow up?
Yes.
The admin costs
Yes.
that are going up, is any of that earmarked for recruitment, advertising?
That's a great question. The answer is yes, but I'm going to caveat it a bit to say that we actually don't, in the same way that we don't fully analyze the full-baked costs of the hourly rate, we don't know all of the details of the administrative rate, but what we do know is that, and particularly for the last 6 months, First Transit has been spending a substantial amount of money trying to do new things to advertise and market their positions. But frankly, we've been clear with them that needs to increase because if we're going to address this through this contractual amendment, we need to be going into this holding hands, and they need to put a significant investment into their marketing efforts. Their commentary on this generally has been that all the good marketing cannot solve the issue of a wage that is simply not competitive. And so we're going to continue doing a lot of what we're doing right now, but I think the thing that's going to jump off the page is not going to be a new flyer or even a new post on LinkedIn. It's going to be the dollar amount that you see pop up. And so we're very much betting on the ability to modify these wages as a result of this contract.
Great. Thank you.
Of course.
Alderman Lopez.
Just some comments that I was referenced a couple of times for the public. I am legally blind, so I'm constantly riding the bus or attempting to ride it, as the case may be. The city bus is very, very much attempting to deal with this crisis, and the staff there are doing a great job of trying to, adjust to new routes and meet new needs and be nimble. And even that being said, they can't always catch, everything. I know I am literate with the systems, and I'll call if I miss the bus or if the bus goes by early or if the bus goes by late. And we're not talking about like a mild inconvenience. We're talking like sometimes 18 to 25 minute variance between where it picks up and drops off versus the schedule. And that's a function of routes being extended, of more and more area trying to be covered by less and less people, more and more people trying to manage a fleet of vehicles that needs to have operational ramps and all that, and nobody on the bench ready to jump in and say, oh, okay, your bus is offline, let me pull in with mine, I'll take your route, and then you can do that. These are logistical challenges that are happening every day around our city. They affect a lot of people who rely on that for all kinds of things like livelihood, medical appointments. The adjustments to the paratransit availability were particularly concerning for me and how that might affect elderly people with mobility issues. So this is not like just a convenience factor. This is a major amenity that our city offers that is not as voluntary for some as it is for others. People don't just take the bus for a little day trip shopping and all that kind of stuff. They rely on it to get their kids, to pick them up from Boys and Girls Club, to do any number of things that, you know, are very important for them. I know in getting here to these meetings and showing up for work, I've probably spent a couple $100 in like last minute lifts or cabs where I haven't been able to, you know, make the connection that I need to make, or, you know, they didn't have the second bus that used to be there that I could jump on if the first one was going to be done before I was ready. So there are a lot of people that are struggling with this, and we are missing out on a lot of ridership too, because, you know, younger riders can be using this instead of, you know, other alternative transportation systems. The schools, Riviera is a contractor with us, and their international programs, I mean, they need to be able to get back and forth from where they're living to the school. And these are people that would pay for their rides and would continue to generate revenue if we had the bus capacity for it to happen. I noticed on Monday's meeting of the Joint Committee of Planning and Economic Development and Infrastructure, it was stated outright that we need to expect inner city neighborhoods to start adjusting their transportation strategies, and we need to move away from this everybody gets a car thing. Well, you can't do that in the absence of an actual public transportation system. And one of the first things to go with respect to Nashua Transit was the east and west routes were heavily reduced. And now you're starting to see even the major ones like Amherst Street reduced. And you're seeing less and less bus access when it was a problem already for people who, for example, want to work on a Sunday and don't have that transportation. So this is definitely a much needed service. The transit system as it is doing its best to be nimble and adaptable to what is a regional issue. They are collaborating with me in a number of other areas, like, you know, the employment committee with the Greater Nashua Continuum of Care, trying to reach new markets, new people who are looking for jobs, and they just don't have the horsepower to do it. When you say beggars can't be choosers, if you present working for our bus company to somebody who's homeless and has a CDL, they're gonna go work at UPS. Of course they can be choosers. So people with the skills that we need and the interest, we're losing them, and we need to be building those relationships, having those long-time drivers who know the routes, know the traffic patterns, know the riders, and we're missing that. I think Nashua Transit's been doing a great job. The city staff and the development department have been doing a great job, and the bus drivers that are there have been doing a great job. And I know at least one bus driver who's doing a great job for Concord Trailways because he gets more money. And, you know, it was a struggle for them. When I saw them on the bus, I was like, hey, I haven't seen you forever. Are you here now instead of over in Nashua? They were like, I love Nashua. Nashua's, believe it or not, Nashua's roads are in better condition than a lot of the competing cities. They have a central hub, so you don't have that confusing transition that like, oh, I'm gonna go change my bus over at this perimeter stop. I love the people in Nashua, but I need to pay my family. And I mean, I need to feed my family. I need to pay my rent. So I think we're struggling with a lot of regional issues, including increasing costs of housing and all that, and so are the bus drivers. So I would encourage everything that the Board of Aldermen can do to support Nashua Transit and the Community Development Department in addressing these issues. We do it because this is an underserved part of our community that we rely on and that relies on us. Thank you.
Alderman Clement.
Thank you. So perhaps through, perhaps either Director Sullivan or the mayor can answer my question here. What impact is this going to have on the budget for next year?
I'd be happy to answer that question. Alderman Clemens, there will be no direct impact on the FY24 budget, at least as of this point in time. There are several reasons for that. One is you're aware, our funding structure for the transit system is quite complex. There's several streams of money coming into it, including a substantial amount of FTA funds, or Federal Transit Administration funds, amongst others. One of the things that I think is important to understand is that during COVID-19, incredible amounts of funds flowed into transportation systems through the ARPA and CARES programs that frankly allowed many of them, including particularly rural providers, to remain solvent for a much longer period of time than I think they would have without those monies coming in through COVID. So in that way, COVID was actually a blessing for public transportation across the state of New Hampshire. The same was true for us here, although to a lesser extent. And so what that allowed us to do is to be very fiscally conservative and careful with our local allocation, which on an annual basis has been $429,000 in recent years, to the transit system, that allows us to actually have some cash on hand available to cover this increase in contract cost with First Transit. I think the question that I'm not prepared to answer tonight, but one that we may have to discuss in the future, is will that be sustainable for years to come, assuming that costs continue to rise, existing federal formula funding remains the same? That crystal ball is much harder to see into. I do believe, and I said this briefly in my memo, I do believe there will be a point coming over the next 18 months where through this body and certainly the Board of Aldermen and the mayor, there will be a conversation about the value that public transit has for the city of Nashua through NTS, because there may be a need for the city to actually contribute additional funds as costs continue to rise and federal funding remains relatively stable over a period of time. So no immediate implications of the fiscal 24 budget. You may see a moderate increase as part of that as a contribution to the Nashua transit system, but there'll be a larger conversation coming in the next, I would say, 1 year to 18 months around contributions to the system.
Yes, go ahead.
So, I guess my question is, do you have, and I don't want to put you on the spot, if you're not prepared to answer, you can just tell me that, but I'm going to support this. I support public transportation. I think it's important for all the reasons Alderman Lopez mentioned and everybody else before me, but the impact that I see is what I don't want to see is if we make this commitment this evening that we pull the rug on people. So if we're committing to this tonight and we're voting yes on this tonight and at the full Board of Aldermen, then we should basically understand that there's going to be a fiscal impact later on down the road that the city's going to have to contribute to. And I just don't know if you know what that figure roughly would be, or...
I can certainly respond. We can make some very rough assumptions. If we assume a full return to service, we also assume that based on these modifications we've had to do, that we don't learn any efficiencies in our system. We continue to provide the same amount of hours. Roughly, I estimate that about 50% of this increased contract cost will have to be filled through some local source. But I want to be very careful about what that means. And I also want to say that it would be easy for me to say we're going to need $200,000 additionally to make this work, but I don't think it's that simple. There are several other local sources of match that we can use, whether it's through partnerships like what we have with RIV, whether it's potential partnerships with the hospitals. We've had past partnerships with BAE. We have the ability to work with employers to set up programs that bring match dollars into the system that buy down what the actual municipality needs to contribute. And so I truly do not know what the number is. We're going to be putting our heads together over the coming months, particularly as we head into the budget season, to talk about what some innovative approaches to revenue might be. But there will be an ask to the municipality at some point in time, and there has been sort of an incremental increase over time. We may need to recalibrate how we look at that, but we're going to have to come forward to you at that time and say that we're doing everything else we can to try to find other match funding sources that can buy down that impact. But no question, this contract amendment is not without financial impact. It certainly does have one. The fortunate position we're in allows us to defer that to an extent safely until that conversation can be fully had.
Alderman Clemens.
Thank you. Thank you for that candid response. I just think it's good to know and to be put out there on the record. And again, this is something that I fully support. My grandmother rode the bus every single day till she was 90 years old. And she said that had she not gotten sick, she would have preferred to get hit by the bus to go instead of the way she did. So for her, it was a lifeline. For a lot of people in the city, it's a lifeline, and it's something I fully support, so.
All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next communication is an emergency PO regarding the purchase of salt. If there's no objection, we'll accept that and place it on file. And we also have a communication received after the agenda was prepared. Alderman Camone.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules and allow for a communication that was received after the agenda was approved.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And we have a communication from Matt Sullivan, Community Development Director. Alderman Camone.
Is that not what we just, oh, I'm sorry. I will make the motion to accept the communication and place it on file.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Unfinished business, we have none. Tabled in committee, nothing. New business resolutions and ordinances, none. Record of expenditures. Alderman Camone.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to make a motion that the Finance Committee has complied with the city charter and ordinances pertaining to the record of expenditures for the period from February 24th, 2023 to March 9th, 2023.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes. General discussion. Is there any general discussion? Public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to address the committee? Remarks by Alderman. Any remarks by Alderman? If not, Alderwoman Clee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the Finance Committee.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, and the meeting of the Finance Committee is adjourned at 7:29 PM.